The Barlat War was a galaxy-wide conflict between the Barlat Concordiat and the Laptiv Axis, the two superpowers of the FP1 region during the 25th century. Following years of increasing tensions, a standoff in the Agnes system escalated into a multinational conflict that would engulf the entirety of FP1, ending in a Phytic Axis victory that eventually led to the destabilization of the entire region. The Laptiv Axis was a loose geopolitical alliance centered around the planet of Laptev. Its members were primarily concerned with expanding their trade interests, and were known for their aggressive and uncompromising attitudes towards diplomacy. The Axis included the Jade Empire of InGen, the Estovian Socialist State, the People's Republic of Imaginarium, the Universal Peace Enforcement Organization, the Cartesian Reich, the Serene Republic of San Marino, the Republic of North Tasmania, Jamesistan and Dongwu, as well as many other allies. The Barlat Concordiat, arranged along similar lines, was an interventionist progressivist alliance with a less militant outlook. Led by the New Free Planets Alliance, other members included the Republics of Alexonia, Kira's Kingdom, the Kingdom of Jovpenia, the United Pokémon Types, the Ishkong, the American Republic, and others. The nations of the Barlat Concordiat and the Laptiv Axis had initially enjoyed friendly relations, fighting as allies in the Vong War, the Carthaginian War, and the War on Holy Trek. Concordiat forces from the New Free Planets Alliance had assisted InGen during the Contrian War, and the Axis dispatched a fleet to support the Concordiat when it came under siege by the rogue nation of Chekanada. As both nations grew in numbers and power, however, they repeatedly clashed over foreign affairs, such as the Arn War and the Axis immolation of the Walfa system. The Axis and Concordiat nearly came to blows during the Battle of Solaris, and only the conditional surrender of National Einheit to the Axis prevented an exchange of fire between Estovian and Kiran fleets. Shortly afterwards, seeking revenge for the deaths of Ishi civilians killed during the weapons-free incident, the Ishi terrorist group Thenian's Immaculate Kin detonated a bomb in the Jade Imperial Goods Exchange on the Neubremen shipyards, killing several thousand civilians. By early 2443 AT, the two factions were on the brink of war. Outraged by the bombing of the goods exchange, the Jade Empire demanded permission to dispatch a team of investigators to the Ishi Isetii system, the suspected origin of the attack. The Jade Empire dispatched 4 destroyers and a ground team to the system to investigate, but claimed to have been met with an extreme lack of cooperation from Ishi authorities, including the intentional destruction of evidence. The Imperial investigators covertly set up and deployed a multi-stage planetary destruction device weapon, a towering device designed to burrow through a planetary core and explode. The Ishkong avoided the destruction of their planet by utilizing endoplanetary shielding, a secret technology never seen before, which prevented the blast from destroying the planet's core. Nevertheless, this blast did obliterate the Ishi city of Amran, killing nearly 750,000 Ishi civilians. The Imperials withdrew from the system, losing the IJN long reach as it fought a rearguard action against the vengeful Ishi war fleets. Simultaneously, the Cheyenne Federation was conducting a pacification campaign in the Agnes system, assisted by the Nelidian Empire. Ishkong forces in-system attempted to intervene, with the situation developing into a standoff as Cartesian and Imperial fleets arrived to reinforce the Cheyennes and Nelidians. When the bomb was detonated at Tyal, the Jade Empire declared war on the Ishkong, and Axis fleets in the Agnes system launched a surprise attack on the Concordiat fleets there. The Concordiat, outnumbered, withdrew, sacrificing their rearguard but preserving the bulk of their fleet. The first battle of the war, Agnes was considered a tactical victory for the Axis, but a strategic victory for the Concordiat, a trend which would continue until the final battle of the war, as Axis combat competency struggled to compensate for superior Concordiat logistical and strategic planning. Following the events at Agnes and Tyal, the Imperial Jade Navy moved to attack Concordiat fleets in the Sol system in support of a ground offensive there. Initial combat went in favour of the Imperial Jade Navy, but Concordiat reinforcements flowed into the system and eventually forced the IJN to retreat. The IJN 4th Fleet, led by Admiral John Cornwale, staged a rearguard action and suffered heavy casualties. but this allowed the rest of the Axis navy to regroup in orbit around Jupiter in preparation for a counterattack. On the ground, Imperial Jade forces in Britannia launched a surprise assault on Kieran Holdings in the south of the Isles. The assault was initially successful, but following the defeat of the navy overhead, the Concordiat leveraged their air superiority to drive the Jade forces back, occupying vast swathes of Imperial territory on Terra and driving back their ground forces at every opportunity. The sole victory of the ground campaign for the Jade Empire was at the Battle of York, when overconfident Jovpenian forces advanced ahead of the rest of the Concordiat armies and were decimated by infantry under the command of Theoden Sea-Watcher. This success was short-lived, as Sea-Watcher was eventually compelled to withdraw to the fortress of York by Kieran reinforcements. There, he resisted a determined Concordiat siege for months, while to the north, a UCR invasion of Jade Imperial territories around Edinburgh developed into another siege, as defenders led by Commander Voland proved incapable of dislodging the Concordiat besiegers. As the situation on Terra settled down into a quiet stalemate, Axis forces from the Estovian Starfleet and the Cartesian Rixmarine moved in force to lay siege to Kirov, the capital system of Kira's kingdom, and to the Ishkong system of Taigal. Protected by an extensive defensive network, the systems themselves remained relatively unscathed, but star access was throttled by the presence of the Laptev warships, and with neither side willing to advance and risk a costly battle. The Nelidian Empire, allies of the Laptev Axis, simultaneously laid siege to the Kiran system of Amaterasu to much the same end, with all three sieges remaining in place until the end of the war, Concordiat defences holding out successfully. The great houses of Z attempted to launch a siege of their own, deploying a fleet headed by one of their famed shipyards to the Nelidian heartlands. Admiral Heinrich Dieter of the Nelidian Empire was able to break this siege, however, and after a brief and intense firefight, the Great House's shipyard was damaged by shells from the HRF Alabaster Fury and was compelled to quit the system, followed shortly after by the rest of the Great House's force. The Concordiat, eager to find a quick solution to the war, developed a makeshift gravitational mass accelerator construct which they built in secret in the uninhabited Zakhaev system. They used this accelerator construct to launch 3 Magnetar stars towards the Laptev system, hoping to crush the Axis fleets there and destroy the planet of Laptev, ending the war in one swift blow and ending billions of lives in an instant. The attack failed after the OSL Shadow, flagship of the Cartesian Order of the Watcher, deployed its entropic drives to redirect the Magnetars away from the system. This failed assault on the Laptev system convinced the Order to join the war in earnest, assisting the Cartesian Rig with their considerable firepower, advanced technology, and powerful armoured knights. Seeking a swift end to the war, the Axis Joint Command elected to risk everything on a cataclysmic battle. Knowing that the Concordiat military strategists were already considering the Cartesian industrial world of Serra as a potential target for their next assault, the Jade Empire began covertly reinforcing the planet with elements of the Brownwater Jade Defense Force. The Axis also disseminated false information that the Jade Empress and Commander Sheikah of the Order of the Watcher would be meeting at Serra to discuss strategies for the Terran campaign. Convinced by the opportunity to capture a key Axis manufacturing base and 2 of its heads of state, a massed fleet of Concordiat warships arrived at the edge of the system late in the year and began a campaign towards the planet, crushing the outlying defences and tightening a ring around the inner planets. Reaching the system core, they were stopped by the combined strength of the Cartesian fleets and Jade Imperial reinforcements, which were able to stall them long enough to allow the combined Laptev fleets to arrive. Unable to escape, and surrounded on multiple vectors by the largest Axis fleet ever assembled, including the gigantic OSL Sharon battle station, the Concordiat forces suffered a catastrophic defeat. Shortly after this, the American republics defected to the Laptev Axis, pouring reinforcements into Terra and bolstering the Jade Imperial defences, prolonging their ability to hold out against siege and weakening the Concordiat position in the system. By this time, the Concordiat and Axis were exhausted militarily and economically. Costly sieges, military occupations, and naval defeats meant mounting losses for both sides, with billions of casualties incurred. A temporary truce developed into a formal ceasefire, By the beginning of Obsidian 2458, both factions had agreed to peace talks. A formal peace treaty, confirming that all territory would return to the status quo antebellum, was quickly drawn up. Concordiat forces withdrew from Jade Imperial territory, Axis fleets lifted their sieges, and all prisoners of war and captured materiel were returned. The Balat Concordiat, rocked by the defection of the American republics and their failure to overcome the numerically inferior Laptiv Axis, dissolved into several splinter groups that would not reform until years later. Although the Laptiv Axis had indirectly achieved its primary goal of ending the threat the Concordiat posed to its geopolitical ambitions, its war fleets were severely weakened. With many of its veteran officers dead, the Laptiv Axis was not in a position to capitalize on the opportunity this presented. Indeed, although the Axis appeared to have a hegemony over power in the region, it was soon forced to abandon many of its more remote outposts, as economic and logistical concerns demanded it concentrate on its core territories. Between the collapse of the Concordiat and the withdrawal of the Axis, many areas of space collapsed into lawless anarchy, depressing the intergalactic economy further. Taking advantage of the situation, the merger began to assault Axis holdings across the FB1 region. Known as Deep Harvest, this shadow war between the merger and the Order of the Watcher resulted in the Cartesian Rik evacuating their territories, boarding the OSL Sharon and taking to the stars soon after the end of the Balat War. By 2460 AT, less than a decade after the conclusion of the war, the situation in FB1 had deteriorated to the point that many of the surviving nations of the Axis elected to follow suit and use entropic tilt drives to transfer their key solar systems to the NS1 region. Although many nations did manage to escape the events of Deep Harvest, few have attempted to return to the FB1 region, and none have successfully reported back so far. The fate of the region remains largely unknown, although it is assumed to be firmly under the control of beings hostile to all sentient life.